This real-side experience would start in a kind of university or other. I was in a library section, collating information, storing books in their appropriate places, etc. News would reach us of a great affliction spreading across the earth. There was quite the panic. It was a virus of a kind, some affliction that was spreading and seemed to exhibit flu-like symptoms. The recipients would gradually worsen, and death was assured. The virus very communicable, easily spread, and with a very high mortality rate. In fact, the mortality rate seemed absolute. The virus reached us in this building, and we all became infected. The symptoms were, as I said, flu-like, a worsening congestion, and a gradually increasing reddening of the skin, like a rash, which covered the entirety of the body, an epidermal inflammation that was increasingly painful. All the peoples in this place were becoming infected. It spread very effectively. All were running around in abject fear and lunacy. I stumbled outside into a street setting, weaving my way among the terrified masses. At this point, I had been fully immersed in the experience, being the experience and the participant rather than the experiencer. So, it was being fully connected to the personal self, featuring in what was a created experience made manifest by the personal self's agreement to the particulars, the effects that made it so, through cause and effect, thinking that the created self was who I was. As I was running through the manic streets of deranged and infected peoples, I too afflicted, my view would switch to a more objective one. No longer was I fully immersed in the experience and the character involved in it, but watching from a more external position, as though connecting to the real self, the real awareness, that which we all actually are, and as these real selves, overseeing the personal created self and its experience. I had the sense then of being two individuals, again as it actually is, the personal created self, doing what it does in creation, dealing with what it has decided and agreed upon, and the real self, watching from the real universes of the ears. The difference was very comparable, as it is comparisons between creation and the real universes that afford us the ability to recognize this true reality and stand real with it, This is indeed the purpose of the simulator. Viewpoints for comparison, for this recognition, and to eventually be with the is. This is our real intent. The real intent being our real awareness. I was experiencing the two states of being and the perspectives from each. The personal self reacting emotionally, walking into this experience as it would any other, and adding emotionally charged ideas and considerations to it. And the real self, the real awareness, standing in objectivity, detached and indifferent, simply being and seeing, regarding the experience and adding nothing in addition to it. For the real self is a being-isness state, and like the sun shining, like the is itself, it simply is. The real self and the is can in fact be no other way, because they do not have personal created vehicles in creation that can add emotion and thought ideas to experience. And in fact, the real self with the is would not be having segmented linear sequences of experience, because it would lack the vehicle to create ideas or agree with them, to create emotionally charged ideas, etc., in response to created situations that it had itself had to experience due to the ideas, creations, thought and emotional agreements it had made previously. The linear sequence of experiences in creation being the effects of the ideas constantly decided, agreed to, and created, experienced through the biological body decoder of information, or causes, into the experience decoded and played out, the effects. And as with any computer or television decoding continuous effect information, it is designed sequentially. One experience or scene follows another. If every scene was experienced simultaneously, it would be rather a mess. But then the personal self will generate ideas in a sequence, never holding or activating more than a few ideas at a time. So it follows that the experiences would be in this way, a few scenes at a time. And so the real self lacks this processor of idea creations to causes experiences, and as such then it has the entirety of everything that is possible as its experience, nothing processed sequentially. It just is. No personal created vehicle activating anything or adding anything to this isness state, and so the perpetuation of this being isness state is maintained in the real universes of the is. But anyway, back to Earth. In this experience, it is demonstrated here how, if we connect with the real self, the real awareness, we now effectively become two. As long as we are in creation, as long as we haven't yet fully recognized the is and how to stand real with it, we will remain in the simulator until we do. As such, we will have our connection to our real selves, and we can stand and switch at will to the new nowness of the is, stand in our real awareness, but we still have the personal self, and if indulged, it will react as it does, according to how its consciousness is constructed, and the routine and typical way it reacts to certain situations in accordance to its design. In my experience here, I would initially be in my personal self, as most people would, with no knowledge or connection to and of their real selves. A viewpoint then of this very limited perspective of being the experience and the participant, then a switch to the real self, and a viewpoint of its objectivity, its being isness state, even in light of the virus contagion circumstances. A good comparison of these two states of being, to be able to recognize the subtle shift between the two made more tangible on the real side. I would decide to remain with the real awareness, this being isness state, for the rest of the experience, even as my personal self went about the business of moving through the various scenes that were to follow. As I was running through the streets, I was aware of elements of the experience that were to come, again because of my connecting and being with the real awareness. I was afforded greater insights, a greater view, able to foresee future events or effects that were coming down the pipeline. Being in the personal self, one can only see the effects as they reach them, and most are unconscious to the causes that create them. The real self is in a state of is everything, and can see the entirety of everything, including everything in creation, from its position, in keeping with it being is, no past, present, or future. It's like, instead of only seeing the next scene in the movie, the real self can see the entirety of the movie at the same time, from start to finish. Rather easy to afford oneself a heads up, if one but pays attention, like having the book of your life and flicking to any page of your choosing, even the very end, to discover what is to come, all based on what is decided and focused upon, and that can change at any given moment according to the personal self. And so the book and movie can instantly change, but still the real self instantly has the changed book and movie, so still can see the entire life experience of the personal self in its entirety. And so I am getting impressions of scenes to come. I am peeping at pages in the book beyond the current personal self-experience, running on the DVD aways. I have the impression there are military types lurking in the bushes, and the further impression my real self affords me is that they are of good intent. Intent always can be ascertained on the real side too, if connected with the real awareness, as those harbouring ill will lack awareness of levels beyond the physical astral, so are unable to regulate their real intents from those seeing them on the real side when connected with the real awareness. And whatever anyone decides in any given moment through the personal self on the physical is instantly so on the real side. Deception then is impossible to conceal. These individuals, these military types, burst from the bushes as I staggered about, well into the stages of the affliction, as it processed through the stages very fast to the inevitable death. They would put me on a stretcher and take me away, giving me constant assurances as to their intentions, which I had confirmed already with my real awareness. They seemed more technological in a way. I had a sense they were not human, or perhaps a more advanced version of the race, not awareness speaking, just in created consciousness, intellect terms. I would indeed find myself in a very sophisticated technological hospital of a kind, with the impression of being in another world even, but close to the earth, almost perhaps another dimension. I and others rescued were cured of our affliction, and it was miraculous in the eradication of it. The scene would shift to a degree, following on from the first, where I was working with these individuals now in their endeavours to rescue more people in this fashion, as now I was a doctor of a kind, and a part of their dimensionally more advanced version of Earth human species, though assisting those on what I might call a lesser Earth dimensional version in the throes of this mighty extinction event plague. This went on for a time, and everything was going swimmingly. I was amongst the squad who were picking up the infected. We landed in a great spacecraft and went about securing all the hapless peoples, curing them of the virus. It was all going fine, as I said, but the virus somehow mutated, and it infected this more advanced earthly dimension where the assistance was coming from. Remaining as a doctor amongst these inter-Earth dimensionals, the team and I had to deal now with our own situation. The virus mutated thus. It was no longer passed, presumably, through the air, as this seemed to have been its delivery system. As an advanced doctor, I just went about my business as though it was all second nature. From my real awareness perspective, I just observed and didn't question how I knew what I did, and performed with such ability in this new role. I was simply observing from another viewpoint, and as I assumed this awareness viewpoint, I had immediate access to all the information, the new view, the new personal vehicle housed. I instantly became the doctor, as I assumed the viewpoint and consciousness of this character. The virus now was making the afflicted have a want to bite. This is common with viruses in that they can encourage certain actions in the host to ensure their perpetuation, that they can spread. And so, almost like a zombie film, everyone infected was biting everyone else, and the affliction would spread. We were running amok now too, my team and I, the situation out of hand, despite the technological superiority, and everyone was scattering with the same fear and reaction as on the initial version of Earth. It became so that this entire dimension of Earth became infected, but death was not the final result. Curiously, the entire species were divided into two teams, the red team and the blue team, and even a blue or red neon coloration was visible upon the bodies of every individual. The virus had segregated the species, and not only this, but it seemed to have instilled in everybody the want to convert the opposing colour, blue or red, into their own. This seemed to be achieved by shooting at each other with sophisticated lasers, and one clean blast was enough to not kill the opposing colour, but convert it to the colour that was your own. There also was a number gauge that everyone seemed to be aware of, personal to them. The longer an individual remained as blue or red, the higher the numbers would rise, and converting the opposing coloured peoples to your colour boosted the number considerably. It seemed that the higher the number, the more formidable you were, the more effective you could evade the opposition, and indeed convert them, with your colour changing weapon.